This is Najma in-house with Global Village Space. I have with me today Dr. Moeed Pirzada, who is a strategic editor and has been very closely following the recent India-China tension. Moeed, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Moeed, tell us, this morning, the Indian Ministry of External Affairs issued a statement saying that the meeting yesterday on the 6th of June between the two military commanders in Ladakh was, the agreement was made that India and China should resolve this peacefully. And it really seems that everything was a damp squid. We had high expectations. Were our expectations unrealistic?
Yes, it's a very interesting situation. No one was really expecting a sudden breakthrough for the Indian side. But the kind of statement that has been issued by the Indian Ministry of External Affairs, and not only this, almost all Indian print publications like Times of India, Hindustan Times, NDTV, and several others, have more or less printed and published a very similar story, which is trying to give a very positive spin to the fact that nothing concrete came out of a 7-hour-long meeting. Some of the Indian publications, though we know that this meeting between the Indian military leadership and the Chinese had been called by the Indian side, it has taken place on the Chinese side of the line of actual control, LSC, and the Chinese have sent a Major General, Liu Len, whereas the Indians have sent a Lieutenant General, General Harinder Singh, which is the Corps Commander, which is of the 14th Indian Corps. So from the symbolism, it was pretty obvious the Chinese are sending a message that we are not in a hurry. It's not an urgent matter for us. We're not desperate to necessarily resolve it. So the meeting takes place on the Chinese side. Chinese send a Major General. Indians request the meeting. This is all a very subtle way of Chinese telling the Indians and the world that who is the stronger and the dominant party. Now, when we speak to the military officers, who understand the military dynamics, we come to understand that the way Chinese have entrenched themselves in this anywhere from 60 square kilometers to 100 square kilometer territory, not necessarily in terms of depth, but in terms of different points altogether, the Chinese are present at least 3 different points, brigade level strength. And they are bringing whatever kind of equipment in terms of artillery pieces, armored vehicles, guns, and other things, which means they have made up a decision and a mind to stay there for a while. So they have sort of entrenched, and when a military does something like this, it is actually sending the signal that it is not in mood to urgently withdraw, and this is not their behavior either. Now, what is happening from the Indian side to which you refer? When you look at all the statement that has been published by the Indian English papers, you see there's a lot of silence, and the Indian public is furious. But when you look at Times of India only, which is the largest Indian English publication, the print publication sells more than 3 to 4 million copies a day, which is it's important to mention this. The Times of India is the largest English publication anywhere in the world. And the story, and it has published 2 stories on that 7-hour meeting. And there have been hundreds and thousands of comments from Indians from all over the world. And these Indian citizens are extremely disappointed, dismayed. They're very angry. They're attacking the government. They're criticizing the Narendra Modi government. They're saying it's a fake coup, it's a fake government. And when they were dealing with Pakistan, they talk in terms of surgical strikes, honor, exaggerated behavior. And here is the Chinese military that has done incursions into the Indian territory, is sitting over there, and they're not even making a solid statement. So the situation, while we didn't expect.
You've just mentioned these newspaper stories and the fact that the diaspora, the Indian diaspora and Indians on ground as well are very upset with Modi. This comes back to what I started off by saying, that did we have unrealistic expectations of what these meetings are going to bring about?
Yes, I think there were unrealistic expectations. In the sense that, of course, the way Chinese are and the way the whole situation has developed after 5th and 6th May, and the way both India and China have a history with each other. Look at Doklam in 2017, look at 1962, 1967, then border management agreements from 1988 onward, the agreement of 1993, the agreement of 1996, the agreement of 2005. So of course there's a history, and nothing could have been resolved in one 7-hour long meeting. But still, I think the Indian citizenry which is very educated, which is very aware, which is worldwide, expected some sort of concrete statement coming from both sides, Chinese and the Indians. And the Indians are now trying to do the damage control. I mean, by even before the meeting of General Harinder Singh, it was released to the media that diplomatic engagement has taken place between an Indian Joint Secretary and the Director General of the Chinese Foreign Ministry, and it has been agreed to settle the border disputes in an alignment with the long-standing agreements, understanding, and so on. And now it is being said that, you know, don't do speculate, don't do sensation. And India, as you understand, has a very free, robust media. And for the first time, we are seeing that India's all publications and websites are not speculating. They're actually producing a handout, whereas every publication has a name of a correspondent or an editor on top of it. If you look at Times of India, NDTV, NDTV, and, you know, Hindustan Times, you see a similarity. Apart from one or two paragraphs or points that are different, and they're also downplaying the fact that the Indian general is the lieutenant general and the Chinese general is not a lieutenant general. That is actually a step down, and it's taking place in the Chinese territory. So all the things don't really good from an Indian citizenry point of view.
So, for example, you mentioned how the Chinese gave this meeting. They wanted to give the symbolism that this meeting is not so important by sending a major general. 2 days earlier, on June the 4th, India had a virtual summit meeting with the Australian Prime Minister, and they signed 9 defense agreements. I mean, was that messaging on India's part?
You know, look, first of all, they're not 9 defense agreements. There's something, they have been quoted as 9 agreements and 7 agreements, but 2 of them specifically relate to a military cooperation in the sense of logistic cooperation, port and navy, and, you know, port facilities and all that, which is similar. And rest of them are, you know, strategic cooperation, economic cooperation, development, and so on. But the two logistic agreements which they have inked are very similar to the LEMUA, which is the Logistic Exchange Memorandum Agreement, which India and United States signed in 2016. Now, regarding the timing, the timing is, of course, very ironical and very interesting, because it is coming at a time when the Indians and the Chinese are trying to resolve this sort of a border conflict and dispute. But it's understandable that this virtual summit meeting between Narendra Modi and Scott Morrison would have been decided several months or weeks in advance, and must have been an American brainwave. This must have been, because if you look at this, I mean, it's very interesting. It's kind of funny. I mean, it's ridiculous. Australia is a puny of a military power. When you look on the map, and it's very important for everyone who listens to this to need to look at the map. On the map, Australia looks like a giant. It's a sort of a continent. It's one of the continents. But Australian Defence Forces on paper are regular 58,000 officials. These 58,000 officials is itself a sort of a confusion or a wrong impression, because the actual combat forces might actually be 10,000 or 15 or 20,000. Australian forces have participated in Boer Wars, Boxer Wars in China, or in First World War and Second World War, always as battalions and regiments as auxiliaries. Australia does not really have a defense establishment. So this kind of posturing, which is being done by Australia, in which India is being sucked against its better judgment for the past 10, 15 years, and against the better judgment of the Australian political leadership, is purely an American Washington brainwave. And if you remember Kevin Rudd, when he was the Australian, Prime Minister in 2009 or 10, he actually, withdrew Australia from all those arrangements against China, with Japan and with India. And similarly, the only real power, if you look around all around China's borders in South China Sea and the Indo-Pacific Ocean, the only potential power with a potential military muscle, with a potential naval force, with the potential sort of a thing, if they really want to challenge China, is India. So, I mean, my understanding is this, that the Indians have a very smart, very sophisticated strategic community, and that strategic community has never been really comfortable or fully willing to become part of any kind of defense and maritime arrangement that overtly challenges China. Yet there has been a political move.
Sorry,
Yes.
so I want to say, yet, so at the same time, while you say that the strategic community has never wanted to be part of this, by signing the agreement 2 days before these meetings that were supposed to happen on the 6th, and then when they know that China is very stressed, is upset about India being part of the Indo-Pacific region plan that the United States has, why would you ever have meetings at that point? I mean, this is what I'm wondering. Was India trying to send a message to China as well, that we are not as frightened as you think? I mean, was this a bluff or a poker game?
I think it's a very good question. It's a very relevant question. You know, if Indians wanted, they could have delayed this meeting. They could have rescheduled the meeting with the Australian Prime Minister, Scott Morrison. They went ahead with the meeting. Admittedly, of course, the meeting must have been planned several weeks ago. And by holding the meeting on 4th June and then signing these agreements, including these strategic naval agreements and port sharing agreements, they're trying to send a message. But this is a stupid message. You know, the Chinese are very deep, and they understand all the statistics and all the issues, and they understand that this is all posturing. Ultimately, when the US elections will take place, I think when whosoever takes up the new administration, these issues have to be settled. United States is creating lots of issues in the immediate vicinity and the strategic atmosphere of China in order to contain China. They are continuously playing inside Hong Kong. Both UK and United States and West are playing inside Hong Kong by encouraging the student, you know, sort of insurgency or movement. They are encouraging Taiwan. They are continuously playing up the South China Sea, which is a strategic zone immediately in the south of Chinese port facilities. I mean, if you look at, I mean, anyone to understand what I'm saying has to look at the map of the South China Sea to understand that the port of Hainan juts into South China Sea. The first special economic zone of, I think, I don't remember the name, the first Chinese special
Shenzhen,
economic zone.
The special economic zone, Shenzhen.
Shenzhen. And then, you know, all Chinese port facilities are very close. So South China Sea is strategically very important for China. On the other hand, the countries that border the South China Sea, the 2 or 3 major countries that border the South China Sea, is either Philippines or the island of Borneo, or it's Malaysia. And if you move further west, then it's actually it's Cambodia or it's Vietnam. But Australia is nowhere a country. I mean, even if you count Indonesia can be one country, Australia is nowhere a country that can claim that it has the right of navigation or free movement through the South China Sea. So all of this has actually been built up. All the countries are being pushed, given economic incentives, given different things to become part of something against China. Now, Indians are very smart. To my mind, as the Indian strategic community understands that they will never, ever be able to or like to take a overt position against China. But now the next question is, why do they keep on doing this posturing? Because they see this posturing against China pleases United States, the West, the Western media, the Western strategic community, the United States, Washington, Congress, Senate, and everything. And they want certain concessions from the West in terms of technology transfer, admission to G7, into G8, into Nuclear Supply Group, NSG. They want a seat on the Security Council. They want technology transfer, whether it's in the form of F-16s or F-18 or whatever, the French technology transfer, the market share, and so on. And the principal problem of India to this day, the existential problem, is with Pakistan. So whatever technology transfer, whether in avionics, aviation technology, all has to be ultimately deployed against Pakistan.
So on this note, I'd like to ask you my final question, which is that you mentioned that Modi is under pressure from his public because he hasn't been seen to display his 56-inch chest that we all hear about. And Prime Minister Imran Khan, on the other hand, the last couple of weeks, we've been hearing about false flag operations. Do you think India will try and sidetrack the let me repeat that. Do you think Modi government will sidetrack the Indian public by trying to create something in Pakistan instead?
I think there is a real risk and possibility on many minds in Islamabad and Rawalpindi, which are looking at the situation very closely for the past several weeks. And they are worried that the kind of stress and humiliation the Modi regime, the RSS and BJP are receiving at the hands of the Chinese which challenges all their paradigms of being the muscular man, the strong man, the assertive leadership and all that, the kind of thing which they showed against the Chinese in Doklam in June 2017, which was not directly related to them. Doklam was basically a sort of a misunderstanding or confusion or dispute between Bhutan and China, and the Indians, being allies of Bhutanese, arrived there in order to stop the Chinese team. And Chinese were taken by surprise, clearly, in Doklam in 2017. So now the Indian political leadership is troubled. While they are not making any assertive or aggressive statements to China, they are continuously intensifying their fire and, across the line of control on the Pakistani Kashmir, Azad Kashmir, on the Indian occupied Kashmir. And they're also making statements on Gilgit-Baltistan. Like, for instance, they're suddenly worried about some Buddha scriptures or statues being violated, or some kind of statements or maps being drawn on some kind of statues. And while they had never thought about the historical sanctity while taking down the Babri mosque, or resurrecting a temple on it, in terms of rewriting the history, reshaping the history, they're suddenly worried about things in Gilgit-Baltistan or Azad Kashmir. So there is a possibility, but once again, it would be a sort of a fake operation, because of the fact that the Indian strategic mind knows fully well that Azad Kashmir is a very difficult challenge in a terrain for them, because Pakistani military has been entrenched there for the past 70 years with perhaps 100 kind of exercises they have done. And the Indian and Pakistanis have engaged each other across the line of control several times. The kind of skirmishes would take place between China and India, the puny of the kind of engagement that takes place between Pakistanis and Indians in the line of control. So they fully know that doing anything meaningful on the Azad Kashmir side is next to impossible. But the political compulsions could always be there for the Modi regime in New Delhi.
We thank you so much for your time today. For our viewers, I would love to hear your comments. Do give us your comments and your feedback and other areas you'd like for us to cover. And thank you for your time, and do subscribe to our channel. Thank you.